Hey folks, it's M here and welcome to the channel. Today we're going to be taking a look at Machine Robo Series MR-32, also known as GoBots slicks. So sit back and enjoy, and don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share. And we're back. Now to start things off, since I actually have the box for this GoBot, I thought we'd take a quick look at it. Here it says MR-32 Machine Robo Series. You can see the figure obviously in its vehicle mode, a really nice yellow sports car. On this side of the box, same thing. On the flip side of the box, you can see the figure in its robot mode. And if this looks different than how people remember it from the 80s cartoon, that's because this is a yellow repaint of it. In the 80s cartoon, it was more of a predominantly black vehicle with yellow highlights, whereas this particular version or repaint of it is mainly yellow. And then on this side of the box, again, you can see the figure in its robot mode. Bottom side, not much happening. Top side of the box, again, not much happening. Now that we've got the box out of the way, why don't we take this figure out of its packaging and move ahead with the review. Okay, so here's Slicks in its polystyrene inner casing. And my view on this sort of thing is that despite the fact that it's not good for the environment by today's standards, I've always really liked this style of inner packaging just because I think it keeps the figure inside really safe and secure compared to some of the cheaper quality clamshells, plastic clamshells that we tend to see nowadays. One thing you'll notice that it's missing, there's normally a really thin sheet of polystyrene that would cover the top portion of this, and that's missing from this particular specimen, as is the little insert that normally shows other figures that you can buy, and it looks like the sticker sheet has already been used and the stickers are applied to the figure. All right, so time to get this figure out of this tray here and move on with the review. Now first off, I thought we'd do a size comparison, and to do that I brought in a figure that I think most people are familiar with from a sizing perspective, and a pretty timeless figure, obviously. That's G1 Bumblebee. So you can see that Slicks is a taller, leaner figure in robot mode, and that Bumblebee is generally kind of a wider design, and you'll see that as well in the vehicle mode. But I think that's an intentional design choice. I know that the original pre-Transformers version of Bumblebee was actually intended to be like a penny racer style figure. And that's why it's got this sort of exaggerated features. It's not really meant to be a real world looking Volkswagen. Again, the original pre-Transformers or Diaclone version of the figure was actually intended to be a penny racer that transformed into a robot. Next off, we'll take a look at articulation. We'll start with the head here. You can see by my finger here where I'm tapping, there's a pin in both sides of the head. So the head will not move, it's stationary. The arms will rotate, they'll move all the way up like this, and they'll move all the way down. You can see from the back here that both arms are obviously restricted in movement because the front wheels tuck in. So those get in the way of the arms doing a full 360 rotation. There's no elbow articulation whatsoever, which is a bit of a shame. I think they could have done that. No knee articulation, and you do get a bit of foot articulation here, but quite honestly, I mean, it counts, but it's due to transformation, but it's really meaningless because you can't use that foot articulation to get the robot in any better poses or anything. So it's there, but it's really insignificant. Before I move along with transformation, and for a little bit of fun, I thought I'd bring in this other version of Slicks here. This isn't the GoBots version of Slicks. This is actually an 80s knockoff version of Slicks that found its way into my collection because anybody that follows me on social media would know that I like to do a little bit of thrifting, and I do take a look at the toy baggies to see what I can find. And I spotted this one in a bag of a bunch of other worthless toys, and I actually thought it was a authentic vintage licensed version of Slicks, and when I got home and took a closer look at it, obviously I saw that it wasn't. Now it may not show up on camera here so well, but the shades of yellow are very different. The official figure is more of a lighter shade. You can see a few differences here. This is number 16, and the knockoff version is a number 36. This knockoff, again, is a little bit worse for wear. You can see the chrome on his face is really worn. So it's not something I would normally buy for my collection, but as kind of a thrift shop purchase, it was kind of a fun one to buy. I am going to point out a couple of differences in the car mode that's going to make it a little bit easier for people to spot if they're looking to buy one of these on eBay or at a toy show and they want to make sure that they're not getting the sort of worthless knockoff version and you want an official one. I can show you a couple things to look for. Even right down to the stickers here on the side, you can see they're very similar. It would be really hard to tell if you don't know what to look for. And again, that's something I thought I'd quickly run through a little bit deeper into the video. Before I get into transformation, I just wanted to point out that when it comes to GoBots in this particular size, Slicks has got the most complex transformation in the entire GoBots line as far as I'm aware. Now, if any other GoBots fans out there have any information to the contrary, if you can name another figure that's in a similar size that has a more complex transformation, let me know in the comments section. I'd be very interested in checking it out. Now, moving on to the transformation, I always like to move the arms straight up like this. Then these wheels, they've got a little bit of clearance here. You can kind of push them around to the front. You have to kind of push them under the arm like that. Then this chest piece will lift up. And if you can keep those two wheels together like that, that's probably for the best. Then down here to the feet, push those out like this. You're trying to get clearance for this portion here. That's kind of on a spring here. So I'm going to lift that out and spin it around and tuck that in like that, and then just do the same thing on the other side. Again, you will feel some resistance because there is a spring in there that's pulling it back into place, which is kind of nice. So that portion's done. Now keep these wheels pushed in like that, which I wasn't able to do there in the transformation. These arms will fold down like this on one side. Then we'll just do that on the other side. Fold the arms down. When it comes to these wheels, push them in, you'll hear a little click. Turn the figure over like this, and you can see there's a space here by my thumb. This will just collapse in like that to get rid of that gap. And then at the back of the vehicle, this engine will push down into place like that. And then these feet will turn up into the spoiler section. Okay, so here he is in his race car mode, and I've got to say they did a really terrific job with this figure. Just turning it up this way, you can see some really nice detail here. Sticker detail, it says Michelin at the back. They've got all the sponsors along the side of the vehicle here. In sticker details, you've got a number 16 turbo on the back here. On the front, number 16 ELF. In the inside here, you can see some really nice shiny chrome. In the driver's cockpit, on the engine block, on these back tailpipes, and the axles here look like chrome, but they're actually die-cast metal. When you flip it to the underside, yeah, you can see a couple of the screw details, which I don't think is really a big deal, but not a whole lot of robot junk. I mean, if you look closely, obviously, well, I mean, his face is just right there staring at you, but you can look closely and see his arms are there. But quite honestly, I mean, I think it's a pretty successful transformation. One other thing I'll point out when it comes to quality is they've got really nice rubber tires here. That was one thing that was pretty standard for original Transformers and GoBots. So that's obviously really nice to see. And another cool thing about these GoBots that a lot of people overlook when they're sort of dumping on the toys from the 80s is that a lot of these smaller ones were in a similar scale. So when you were playing with your friends, you know, playing with your GoBots, you didn't have to worry about one car being huge compared to another one. Just thinking of the Transformers line, you've got the Bumblebee figure that I just showed you. But if you wanted that to interact with something like Sideswipe or Sunstreaker, the size difference would be ridiculous. It would really take a child's imagination to try to get around that and work around that when you're playing. But certainly with the GoBots, you just didn't have that trouble. Speaking of Bumblebee, I'll just bring it in here and do a quick size comparison. I don't want to spend a lot of time on it. But there he is. Again, Bumblebee really isn't meant to look like a real world Volkswagen. I mentioned that earlier. Whereas obviously Slicks is meant to be a scaled down real world race car. So you can see the difference in size, obviously. Very different. Very different for probably a very similar price point back in the 80s. I don't specifically remember how much they were. I'm thinking they were just a couple of bucks each for both figures. Now we'll move along here and bring in the knockoff version of Slicks. So I've already transformed it. A couple things I'm going to point out. So obviously I mentioned earlier that the number at the front is different. Number 36 on the knockoff compared to the number 16. This one here doesn't say ELF on it. The side detail, you can see as well, it's got the number 36 instead of number 16. The sponsor details are identical right down to the spelling. On the back here, same thing, Michelin, FRCOM, whatever that means. That's exactly the same. On the underside of the vehicle, though, is where things look a little bit different. You can notice the official figure on the left. The shape of the entire nose of the vehicle is entirely different, and it's painted. So that's one thing to look for here. If you look in the light here, I'm intentionally tilting it so you can see it says 1983 Japan Bandai MR-32 on the left, and then on the right, I don't know if you can see that. Unfortunately, I can't focus it any better because my hands are occupied, but it just says Taiwan, which was a place where a lot of knockoff GoBots were manufactured back in the 80s. When you look at the front side of the vehicle, or the top of the vehicle, I mean, the knockoff has the same chrome detailing, which is good, only again, this particular specimen's a little worse for wear. But again, you can see at the front how the shape of that front end of the vehicle is very different. Another thing I'll point out here is that the wheels are very different as well. I think these are still rubber. They still feel like rubber wheels on the knockoff, but you can see Slicks actually has a set of slicks on the back and the front. He doesn't have the tread like this other vehicle has. It's just the really slick wheels with no tread that they use in actual car racing. I guess that's why they call them Slicks. So anyway, that's just a couple of things that, again, I just thought I'd point out with these two versions of the figure that might make it a little bit easier not to end up buying the knockoff version when you're actually looking for the original authentic version of either GoBots or the Machine Robo figure. All right, well, before we wrap this one up, just a few words about the figure here. I mean, would I recommend picking up a MR-32 or GoBots Slicks? Quite honestly, if you can find this for the right price, I would say absolutely go ahead. I know that the prices of all vintage figures, including GoBots, have been creeping up in recent years. When it comes to the GoBots, I know historically they didn't really get any love, but more recently we've been seeing some of these new, really cool GoBots or Machine Robo figures from the Action Toys line, and I don't know if that's had anything to do with pushing up the price of some of these vintage GoBots. But if you can find one of these figures for 10 or 15 bucks tops, I would say definitely pick it up. If you're talking a carded figure or one in the box like mine, obviously the price is going to go up from there. It's very difficult to find any boxed figures that cheap these days. But definitely a loose specimen for 10 or 15 bucks. I don't think you can go wrong. All right, well, I'm going to leave it at that for today. Just want to thank everybody for checking out my Machine Robo series, MR-32, also known as GoBots Slicks. And on a side note, I did want to end off with a sincere thank you to all of my friends in the Transformers community. Anybody that knows me from elsewhere would know that I've recently been dealing with a challenge in my life, and I've had a number of good friends reaching out to me in social media, giving me their support, wishing me well, sending good thoughts my way. So you guys are really the reason why I do what I do. So I want to thank you for that and just sort of giving me the inspiration to move ahead. And I just want to let you know that it definitely won't be forgotten. You know, the Transformers community is an amazing community to be involved with. This is the reason why I got involved in the first place. And I've quite honestly never been more proud to be part of the Transformers community than I am right now. So anyways, thanks again, everybody, and expect more from me soon. Take care.